Hey, Julian Kraus here, and I was recently guest on Ray Ortega's podcast, and he asked me how I check my voiceover recordings for noise. I did shortly explain my method on the podcast, but I think this is a very interesting topic, and that's why I'm going to show you how to check your dialogue recordings for noise in more detail here. So I actually use two methods to check for noise in my recordings. The first one is pretty simple. I just listen to my recordings. And even though this sounds very obvious, there are a few things to watch out for when listening for noise. My second method of checking for noise is a bit more scientific. I've come up with a special way of looking at the audio meters, and from there I can roughly determine the amount of noise I've got in my recordings. And of course I will also explain how this works in this video. For both of these methods to work, you do need to record a small part of silence. So when you're recording your dialogue, you simply have to be quiet for a few seconds so that you can only hear the ambience and self-noise of your equipment. Now let's take a look at a practical example. Here I do have an audio recording of my voice, and in the end I was completely silent for a brief moment. By the way, I'm showing you everything inside Adobe Audition, but both of my methods are possible to pull off with any other digital audio workstation as well. Even the freeware Audacity will work just fine. Okay, back to topic. This is the silent part, and that's what I'm interested in, because this is the actual noise floor of my recording. Now, you might be tempted to straight up listen to this, but the problem is that you usually record your audio much lower than you distribute it. So if you would simply listen to the silent part right now, it will give you a false impression of the overall noise floor. You always want to know how high your noise floor is in comparison to your dialogue. So use your recorded dialogue to set your speakers or headphones to a comfortable listening volume, and then listen for noise in the dialogue and in the silent part. At this point you should have a pretty good idea how clean your raw recording is, and it is of course important to start off with a clean recording. But I must also stress that the recording is not yet loudness normalized, and because things like compression and EQ are also not yet applied to the audio, your noise floor can still increase or decrease drastically in the final product. And that's why I advise that you do all your audio processing including loudness normalization first, and then listen back to the dialogue and silent part again, because that's the noise floor you will finally end up with, and that's the noise floor you want to evaluate. So go ahead and process your audio like you would normally do. Now that you got your recording finalized, again use your recorded dialogue to set your speakers or headphones to a comfortable listening volume, and then listen to the silent part. If you can clearly hear noise in the silent part, you already know that you do have a potential problem. In this situation, you would then try to find out what is causing the noise so that you can eliminate this noise source in future recordings. And I will teach you how to identify different noise sources by listening to them in another video. Now let's say you did not hear any noise in the silent part of your recording. This can either mean that you do not have any audible noise in your recording, or that there is noise, but you simply cannot hear it with your playback equipment. So regardless if you did or did not hear any noise in the silent part, you still might want to check if your noise floor is at an acceptable level. And this is where my second method comes in. In Audition, it works like this. First, go to your effects rack, add a parametric EQ effect. Here you can activate the high pass filter, which you can then set to 500 Hz and 6 dB per octave. The high pass filter is important because it attenuates low frequency content, which we as humans tend to be not very sensitive to at low levels. So the measurement we end up with will more closely represent the noise level as we perceive it. After you added the high pass filter to your recording, play back the silent part and watch your level meter. If the levels stay on average below -60 dB, the noise tends to be inaudible. If your level hovers around -60 dB, I would still consider this a low noise floor, and in the most cases you should be fine. But if your audio level continuously stays above -60 dB, your recordings tend to be on the more noisy side. One word of caution: the noise threshold at -60 dB is a personal preference. Every person will have a different threshold to which they consider noise to be acceptable. This -60 dB level is something I've come up with over the past few years, and it represents an average noise acceptance level. It's not a hard limit, but rather a rough number to aim for. So this method is not 100% foolproof, but for general indoor dialogue recordings or voiceover stuff, this will give you a pretty good indication on how high your noise floor is and if it is acceptable or not. When you're finished with evaluating the noise floor, don't forget to delete the high-pass filter again. This was only temporarily needed to check the noise level. So to recap, in your next recording, stay quiet for a few seconds to record a silent part. You can initially listen to your raw recording and see if there's already any noise. Then process your audio like you would normally do and evaluate the noise floor of the final product. Additionally, you can check your final noise floor by adding a high-pass filter at 500 Hz with 6 dB per octave, and then check if your audio levels are around or below -60 dB in the silent part. Now, if you do have noisy recordings and you want to know how to avoid noise in the first place, subscribe to my channel to not miss any future videos on how to battle noise in your recordings. And of course, check out Ray Ortega for some more great content on audio recording and podcasting. Till then, don't give noise a chance, and I see you in the next one.